Investigators drop a treason bombshell, forcing Tim Walz's staffers into total shutdown.
Turned an eye to, or for some reason has turned a blind eye to, that even some of his allies are saying that his political career is over. Former Minnesota State Senator and political analyst in Minnesota. This is, who is this? Amber Reichgott.
The host just dropped a bombshell stating, even some of his allies are saying that his political career is over. This is massive because when your own team starts abandoning ship, you know the situation is catastrophic. They're discussing how the scandals in Minnesota have gotten so bad that Walz has either turned a blind eye or deliberately ignored them. What's truly shocking here is that this isn't coming from Republicans or opposition. These are political analysts and allies in Minnesota who are throwing in the towel on Walz's future. The fact that people who should be defending him are instead writing his political obituary tells you everything about how severe this situation has become. This is the kind of insider panic that signals a complete political collapse.
Candidate that might run. Anonymous longtime ally of Walz's in Minnesota, a different person, said it's clearly a real vulnerability. Even suburban dads would bring it up to me over the summer.
Which is interesting because this news of this fraud has been.
Political analyst Amber June just said he is clearly vulnerable and, in my view, is riskier than any Democratic candidate that might run. Now, they're revealing that an anonymous longtime ally of Walz called this clearly a real vulnerability and mentioned that even suburban dads were bringing this up over the summer. Think about that for a second. Everyday suburban fathers, the demographic Democrats desperately need, were already concerned about this scandal months ago. This wasn't some fringe issue or Republican talking point. This was mainstream concern from regular voters in his own state. When your longtime allies are anonymously leaking to reporters that you're too risky to run, that's not just damage control, that's a full-blown abandonment. The walls are closing in and everyone knows it.
It's now the biggest fraud case in America. Over $1 billion. There's probably more to come, more things to come out of this as well. Was it incompetence? Was there some skimming of money off the top, and sort of putting a blind eye to it? We don't know. But the investigation.
Rachel just revealed now the biggest fraud case in America, over $1 billion. There's probably more to come. Holy smokes. We're talking about the biggest fraud case in the entire country, over $1 billion. That's not a typo, folks. And they're saying there's probably more to come. This thing is still unfolding. The scale of this is absolutely mind-boggling. They mentioned the fraud has been circling around Minnesota for a while, but it's really broken open now, and we're seeing the true magnitude. When you're dealing with billions in fraud and officials are saying there's more to uncover, you're looking at systematic corruption on a level that's almost unbelievable. This makes other political scandals look like parking tickets.
To get to the bottom of this, but Griff, everyone's trying to wash their hands of all of this. They're going to throw the Democrats in Minnesota are throwing Tim Walz under the bus and saying that's on him. We don't know how far this goes.
Well, the question is whether or not Walz's administration.
The hosts are asking the critical questions. Was it incompetence? Was there some skimming of money off the top? They're laying out the two possibilities here. Either Walz's administration was completely incompetent and let $1 billion fraud scheme happen under their noses, or they were actively involved in turning a blind eye for their own benefit. Neither option is good. And then they mention the DOJ has promised to get to the bottom of this. When federal investigators are involved in $1 billion fraud case, that's not just a state issue anymore. This is national. The fact that everyone's trying to wash their hands of this shows they all know how toxic this scandal is. Democrats in Minnesota are scrambling to distance themselves before they get caught in the blast radius.
To go after particularly Somali illegal aliens that are protected in the sanctuary state of Minnesota, the sanctuary city of Minneapolis. Here, let me show you some of the criminals. The Somali illegal aliens have been rounded up just in the past week or so in Minnesota, and these are the people.
Griff is hitting the nail on the head, asking whether or not Walz's administration was was at best incompetent or at worst complicit in allowing this unprecedented fraud. At best, they were incompetent, meaning they were so bad at their jobs that over $1 billion got stolen on their watch. At worst, they were complicit, meaning they knew about it and either participated or let it happen. Either way, this is career-ending stuff. The use of the word unprecedented is key here. This isn't just another political scandal. This is historic in its scope and scale. When historians look back at government corruption cases, this Tim Walz Minnesota fraud is going to be a case study. The Trump administration has already been triggered into action, going after the criminals involved. This is expanding beyond just state politics.
Violations. Osman Shadani convicted of criminal sexual conduct with a minor aged 13 to 15. That's a child. Muhammad Ali. Convictions include domestic assault, fraud, robbery, and larceny. Finally, Muhammad Omar charged with 2 counts of domestic violence. These are not the best of the best.
This is where it gets really damning. They're going to throw the Democrats in Minnesota are throwing Tim Walz under the bus and saying that's on him. His own party is sacrificing him. When Democrats start publicly blaming Walz and distancing themselves, you know the internal polling must be disastrous. They're not even trying to defend him anymore. The phrase throwing under the bus is key because it shows this is intentional. They're making him the scapegoat. But here's the thing. If Democrats are this quick to throw him under the bus, what do they know that we don't yet? The statement, "we don't know how far this goes," is chilling because it suggests the investigation could implicate more people, more money, and more corruption than we currently know about.
Jack Brewer on earlier, somebody who's from Minnesota, knows it, or played in Minnesota when he was in the NFL, spent a lot of time there, has family that lives in Minnesota. He's talked about the poverty rate of, this is a lot of African Americans who live in Minneapolis, the poverty rate, the education, how bad.
Rachel is exposing where the money went. Meanwhile, this money has been spent overseas in all kinds of schemes, buying real estate. It's gone into terrorists' hands. Terrorists' hands? This just went from a fraud scandal to a potential national security issue. They're revealing that this billion-dollar fraud wasn't just stolen money sitting in someone's bank account. It was funneled overseas, used to buy property, and potentially funded terrorism. This is absolutely insane. The money that was supposed to help American citizens that taxpayers funded ended up enriching criminals and potentially funding people who want to harm America. If this is proven true, we're not just talking about fraud anymore. We're talking about something that could border on treason. No wonder Walz's allies are panicking.
We have to have this conversation about assimilation and who actually wants to come to this country and make it better versus these guys that you had up on the board.
If you're coming to the country to get welfare or to commit fraud, then you're not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
You're here. We are the dumping place for bad people from other places.
They're bringing in the human cost and all of this money getting wasted when it could have gone to really help people. And it's absolutely shameful. This is the part that should make everyone angry regardless of politics. There are real people suffering. They mention poverty rates, education failures, communities that desperately need help. And instead of that $1 billion going to actually improve lives, fix schools, lift people out of poverty, it went to fraudsters who sent it overseas or pocketed it. They specifically mentioned how Jack Brewer talked about the poverty rate of African Americans in Minneapolis and how bad the education system is. That money could have transformed those communities, could have actually made a difference. Instead, it's gone, stolen. And Walz either didn't care enough to stop it or was too incompetent to notice. This Tim Walz fraud scandal is shaping up to be one of the most devastating political collapses in recent American history. We're talking about the biggest fraud case in America, over $1 billion stolen from programs meant to help vulnerable people. The most damning aspect? Walz's own allies and longtime supporters are abandoning him, calling his political career over and labeling him too risky to support. The scandal presents a no-win situation for Walz. Either his administration was catastrophically incompetent, allowing criminals to steal over $1 billion without noticing, or they were complicit, actively turning a blind eye or participating. Neither scenario is defensible. What makes this even more explosive is that the stolen money allegedly went overseas, funded real estate schemes, and potentially ended up in terrorists' hands, escalating this from a fraud case to a potential national security crisis. The political fallout is already in motion. Democrats in Minnesota are throwing Walz under the bus, making him the scapegoat before the investigation fully concludes. The fact that allies are speaking anonymously to reporters about his vulnerability shows the internal panic. Even suburban dads, a key demographic, were discussing this scandal months before it broke wide open. Perhaps most tragic is the human cost. Communities that desperately needed help, suffering from poverty, failing schools, and lack of opportunity, were robbed of resources that could have transformed their lives. That $1 billion could have lifted people out of poverty, revolutionized education, and provided real opportunity. Instead, it lined the pockets of criminals and fraudsters. The DOJ investigation is ongoing, and officials keep saying there's more to come, which suggests this scandal could grow even larger. When your own political allies are predicting your career is over, when federal investigators are digging deeper, and when the scale keeps expanding, you know this is terminal. Tim Walz's political career may indeed be finished, and this fraud scandal might become the textbook example of government corruption and incompetence for years to come.